The crack of an M4 carbine echoed across the Coronado Range, and 8 Navy SEALs turned in unison toward Lane 20. A woman stood there, brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, adjusting her stance with movements so deliberate they bordered on painful to watch. The rifle in her hands looked ancient by modern standards. No tactical scope, no laser designator, just basic iron sights that belonged in a museum. Her civilian contractor badge swung slightly as she settled into position. Bennett Equipment Maintenance. Hey, is that lady actually shooting, or is she practicing for a statue competition? Lieutenant Carter Reynolds' call. Sign Hawk grinned, elbowing the man beside him. At this rate, Christmas will come before she finishes one magazine. Laughter rippled through the SEAL group. Petty Officer Dylan Brooks, who'd crowned himself king of the range after 3 consecutive qualification and victories, turned to Chief Instructor Fletcher Garrison. Sir, is this really the standard for civilian contractors? Now my grandmother moves faster, and she's been dead 6 years. The woman Iris Bennett, according to her badge, didn't turn around. She simply inhaled deeply, shoulders dropping half an inch, her index finger ghosting across the trigger guard. 3 seconds passed. 5, 7. Then she squeezed. Ping. The metallic ring of bullet meeting steel target at 100 yards sang across the morning air. Dead center. Lucky shot, Dylan muttered, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. What none of them knew was that in the next 20 minutes, this slow old lady would force every one of them to stand at attention. They were about to discover exactly how wrong assumptions could be, and when her shirt tore, revealing ink that existed only in legends whispered among elite operators, the silence that fell would be the kind that precedes earthquakes, total, suffocating, and charged with the weight of revelation. Chief Instructor Fletcher Garrison flipped through the morning roster, his weathered fingers pausing on a name that made him frown. Iris Bennett, 3 weeks in equipment maintenance. The background check section was almost insulting in its brevity. No prior military service listed, no firearms experience documented, standard civilian contractor clearance only. He glanced up at Lane 20, where the woman was methodically cleaning her rifle with movements that were oddly precise. $50 says she doesn't make it through basic qual. Dylan Brooks had his wallet out before the challenge left his mouth. Any takers? Connor Sullivan, another SEAL trainee, smirked. Too easy. Make it interesting she doesn't hit 70%, and she has to admit women can't handle combat pressure, in writing. Lieutenant Commander Bianca Winters crossed her arms from her position near the observation deck, her voice carrying the particular sharpness of someone who'd spent years proving herself in male-dominated spaces and resented having to do it again for every new female face. Another diversity checkbox who thinks a weekend pistol class makes her qualified. This should be educational. Iris Bennett set down her M4 and reached for a cleaning cloth. Her hands moved without conscious thought, fold, quarter turn, fold again, creating perfect military hospital corners that would have passed white glove inspection at Paris Island. The towel formed a precise rectangle, edges aligned within millimeters. Nobody watching noticed. They were too busy placing bets and cracking jokes about whether she'd remembered to remove the safety. Fletcher studied her through narrowed eyes. Something about the way she handled that cloth nagged at him like a song whose lyrics he couldn't quite recall. But civilian contractors came in all flavors these days. Probably just worked in a hotel or something. All right, contractors. Fletcher's parade ground voice cut through the morning chatter. Standard qualification course, 20 rounds, targets at 50 and 100 yards. Pass rate is 70%. You fail, you're restricted to maintenance areas only. No range access, clear, murmurs of acknowledgement. Iris simply nodded, once her expression revealing nothing. Dylan stage whispered to Carter, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Think she knows which end the bullets come out of." More laughter. Iris's jaw tightened fractionally, the only sign she'd heard, but she said nothing. Her silence seemed to encourage them. Corpsman Caleb Palmer, who'd been smarting since a female MP had written him up for improper storage protocols last month, drifted past Iris's station. His hand brushed her ammunition box, nudging it slightly. A few older corroded rounds from his pocket slipped into her supply, mixing with the good ammunition. Insurance, he thought. Let's see how she handles a malfunction. Iris approached the firing line, her stance shifting automatically into perfect isosceles position. Feet shoulder width apart, weight distributed forward on the balls of her feet, elbows slightly bent to absorb recoil. The posture was textbook muscle memory from thousands of repetitions. But in civilian clothes without context, it looked like beginner's luck or a YouTube tutorial memorized overnight. Fletcher raised his hand. "Contractors, you may commence firing." The range erupted with gunfire. Other contractors flinched, jerked triggers, sent rounds scattering across target zones. Iris simply exhaled, let her heartbeat settle into the space between breaths, and pressed the trigger with the smooth acceleration of someone who understood that shooting was 90% mental preparation and 10% mechanical execution. Ping, center mass. "Granny's gonna dislocate her shoulder," Carter called out, but his grin faltered when Iris absorbed the recoil with zero muzzle rise. Her body moved with the weapon not against it, redirecting force through her skeletal structure, rather than fighting it with muscle tension. 4 more rounds. Ping, 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 ping. Each shot landed within a 2-inch grouping at 100 yards, the kind of consistency that required either extraordinary talent or countless hours of practice. The rhythm of her breathing was audible to anyone paying attention. 2 seconds in 1 second, hold squeeze on the exhale, 2 seconds out. Combat breathing. Stress inoculation protocol. Corporal Chloe Bradford leaned toward Seaman Delilah Torres, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you see her grip? That's not civilian technique. That's modified Weaver with thumbs forward. You don't learn that from a weekend class." Delilah's eyes widened. "Maybe she's a competitive shooter. Maybe." But Chloe didn't sound convinced. On the observation deck, a man in khakis and a faded baseball cap lowered his coffee mug. Senior Chief Petty Officer Ronan Clark had 32 years in naval special warfare, and he'd seen things that made normal people wake up screaming. Right now, he was watching something that tickled the edges of memory, something about the way that contractor held her shoulders, the angle of her head, the economical efficiency of movement. He knew that silhouette, or he had once. But from where? If you're already hooked by how she handles that rifle smash, that like button right now, because what happens next is going to blow your mind. This woman isn't who they think she is, and when the truth comes out at the 55-minute mark, jaws will literally hit the floor. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the moment when these cocky SEALs realize who they've been messing with. Trust me, you'll want to see their faces. Iris completed her qualification string. 19 out of 20 rounds center mass. 1 shot slightly off-center the corroded round Caleb had planted, which she'd identified by weight during her press check, and deliberately placed last in her magazine, firing it into the dirt berm instead of risking a malfunction during timed assessment. Fletcher marked her scorecard. "Adequate. Nothing special." The dismissal in his voice could have frozen seawater. Iris accepted the clipboard, signed her name, and started to walk back toward the equipment area. That should have been the end of it, a passing grade, a civilian doing civilian things, everyone going about their day. Carter Reynolds had other ideas. "Hey, sweetheart." He stepped into her path, smile predatory hand, reaching toward her shoulder with the casual entitlement of someone who'd never been told no. "That was pretty good for a beginner. Maybe I could give you some tips. Buy you dinner, show you proper combat stance. I know this great steakhouse off base." Iris sidestepped smoothly, maintaining exactly 3 feet of distance, her movement so precise it could have been measured with a laser. "No, thank you, Lieutenant." Her voice was quiet, respectful, completely devoid of emotion. She didn't elaborate, didn't justify, didn't engage. The rejection landed like a slap. Carter's smile turned brittle. Dylan Brooks sensed blood in the water and circled closer. "What too good for us? Or maybe you're more comfortable cleaning toilets than hanging with actual operators." The group around him snickered, their laughter sharp with pack mentality. Iris kept walking, silent, professional, giving them nothing to grab onto. It only made them push harder. Warrant Officer Edward Wright sat in the admin building tablet, balanced on his knee, running routine background checks on new contractors. Iris Bennett's file was too thin for someone who'd listed equipment maintenance as a specialty. He clicked through to secondary databases, cross-referencing social security numbers, previous employment addresses. Something felt off, like looking at a photograph with the important parts cropped out. He stood tucking the tablet under his arm and headed for Captain Thornton's office. Probably nothing. But in intelligence work, probably nothing was usually something. Back on the range, Gunnery Sergeant Jasper Hayes, the range safety officer whose job was preventing idiots from accidentally shooting themselves, watched Iris methodically clean her weapon. The way she field-stripped the M4 bothered him. No hesitation, no checking the manual. She'd removed the bolt carrier group in 4 seconds flat, inspected the gas rings with a glance, and reassembled everything with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd done it 10,000 times in the dark. "Chief," Jasper said quietly to Fletcher, "that woman's breathing pattern during live fire. You notice?" Fletcher shrugged. "Some people are naturally calm. Not like that. That's box breathing. 4-count cycle. You don't do that naturally. You're trained into it." He paused. "That's military stress management protocol." Fletcher's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, the first crack in his certainty. "Probably does yoga or something. Civilians read about this stuff online now." But his tone said he was trying to convince himself. Lieutenant Commander Bianca Winters descended from the observation deck, her stride purposeful, her expression carved from ice. She'd spent 15 years fighting for respect in the Navy, enduring twice the scrutiny for half the recognition, and watching another woman waltz in with barely any credentials made her blood simmer. "Bennett," her voice cracked like a whip. "Since you passed basic qual, let's see if you can handle intermediate assessment. Moving targets." Iris turned her face carefully neutral. "That wasn't part of the contractor familiarization program, ma'am. Consider it voluntary, unless you're not confident in your abilities." The challenge hung in the air, barbed and deliberate. Carter jumped in sensing opportunity. "Yeah, Bennett, let's make it interesting. $50 says you can't hit 3 out of 5 moving targets, unless that basic qual was just beginner's luck." The crowd had grown. Word spread fast on a military base. Entertainment was rare, and public humiliation was always popular. 20, 30, then 40 personnel gathered around the range, some curious, some eager for spectacle, all of them ready to watch a civilian contractor get taken down a peg. Iris looked at the moving target system, mechanical arms, swinging clay pigeons in randomized patterns, speeds varying from lazy arcs to violent jerks. The kind of challenge designed to separate recreational shooters from people with actual tactical training. "Acceptable," she said quietly. Just one word, no bravado, no pushback, pure professional assessment. Dylan practically crowed with victory. "This is going to be good." The moving target system hummed to life. 5 clay pigeons mounted on articulated arms that swept through 180 degrees of motion, their paths deliberately unpredictable. The motor speeds changed randomly every 30 seconds, creating approach angles that required instant mathematical calculation. Windage elevation, lead time, and target velocity all factored in, real time. Iris chambered around. The metallic click of the bolt sliding home was crisp, definitive. She didn't rush to the firing line. Instead, she stood still for a moment, head tilted slightly, watching, listening. The mechanical arms had a rhythm, a pattern buried in their apparent randomness. Every motor had a distinct frequency. Every pivot point had a tell. Carter crossed his arms. "Clock's ticking, Granny." Iris stepped to the line, weapon up. Breathing settled. The first clay pigeon swung into view at the far extension of its arc, moving left to right at approximately 15 feet per second. Most shooters would fire immediately while the target was visible. Most shooters would miss. Iris waited until the target reached maximum extension, where its velocity momentarily approached 0 before reversing direction. Then she fired. Crack! The clay exploded into orange dust. The timing was surgical. The kind of precision that required understanding physics, motion, prediction, and the patience to wait for the optimal engagement window rather than the obvious one. "Okay, that was..." Carter started. Crack! Second target disintegrated mid-sentence, Iris having fired without apparent aiming her muscle memory, placing the shot based on sound cues and peripheral vision. "Lucky," Carter finished weakly. Crack, crack, crack. 3 more targets in 6 seconds. The final shot came during a wind gust that sent the clay pigeon wobbling erratically. Iris adjusted her point of aim, 2 degrees right, accounting for crosswind drift at 100 yards, and punched through dead center. 5 shots. 5 targets, 0 misses. The range fell silent, not the comfortable silence of routine activities, but the stunned silence of expectations being violently overturned. Somewhere in the crowd, Someone's coffee mug slipped from nerveless fingers and shattered on concrete. Dylan stared at the empty mechanical arms. What the? That's not possible. Wind shifted twice. She didn't even pause to calculate. She calculated. Fletcher's voice was quiet, almost reverent. You just didn't see it. That kind of compensation happens in the first half second of target acquisition. By the time most people are thinking about wind, she's already solved for it. Ronan Clark stood abruptly on the observation deck, binoculars coming up to focus on Iris's hands. He could see them clearly now, the calluses on her trigger finger formed by 10,000 repetitions, the distinctive thickening of the thumb web from high-volume shooting, the slight scarring on her knuckles that spoke to repelling injuries and rough field work. Those weren't contractor hands. Those were operator hands. Iris set her weapon down, safety engaged muzzle pointed downrange in perfect protocol. Nobody had told her where to point it. Nobody had reminded her about safety procedures. She just knew, moved with the automatic precision of someone for whom firearms handling had transcended conscious thought and become instinct. Bianca's face had gone pale, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. Moving targets are predictable once you learn the pattern. Let's see you handle real pressure, stress shooting with time constraints. Commander, Fletcher interjected, that's not part of standard civilian protocols. She doesn't have to accept. Bianca's smile was razor thin. Unless she's afraid of proving that basic qual was her ceiling. Iris remained silent for a long moment, her gaze distant, as if calculating odds and outcomes in some internal ledger. Finally, what are the parameters? Carter sensed his chance to salvage wounded ego. New bet, double or nothing, $100. He paused for effect. But this time, blindfolded. The crowd reaction was immediate. Gasps. Murmurs of, that's impossible, and nobody can do that, rippled through the assembled personnel. Even Fletcher looked skeptical, now his professional mask cracking to reveal genuine concern. That's not a reasonable assessment, Jasper protested. That's circus trick territory. She doesn't have to do it, Dylan said smugly. She can walk away right now. No shame in knowing your limits. Every word was calculated to apply maximum social pressure. Every eye on the range was watching. Backing down meant confirming every stereotype, validating every dismissive comment, proving that her earlier success was luck rather than skill. The trap was perfect. Iris looked at the blindfold. Carter was holding a black cloth strip that would eliminate all visual input. She looked at the moving target system still running its randomized patterns. She looked at the assembled crowd, their faces skeptical, amused, or in Chloe's case, desperately hopeful. 5 targets, Iris said, finally her voice barely above conversational volume. Same moving system. I'll need someone to confirm I'm not cheating. The matter-of-fact way she said it, as if blindfolded shooting, was simply another task on a checklist sent chills down several spines. Jasper stepped forward. I'll observe. If there's any indication she can see through the blindfold, I'll stop the exercise immediately. Carter handed over the cloth with a triumphant grin. Your funeral sweetheart. Iris took the blindfold, tied it herself with practiced efficiency, and turned so Jasper could verify complete coverage. He checked carefully, professional thoroughness, overriding his growing suspicion that something extraordinary was about to happen. She can't see anything. I'll verify each shot. The world went dark. Iris's remaining senses sharpened in response. The mechanical whir of the target motors became crystal clear, each distinct frequency painting a mental picture of position and velocity. The wind against her skin told her drift. The temperature differential between sun-warmed air and shade gave her distance cues. She'd done this before, countless times in situations where visibility was a luxury and sound was survival. She chambered around, listened. The target motors ran in overlapping cycles. Motor 1 at 0.7-second intervals, Motor 2 at 0.9, Motor 3 at 1.1. The pattern emerged like music from chaos. Whenever you're ready, Fletcher said quietly. He'd stopped smiling. Whatever this civilian was, she wasn't what she appeared, and he was beginning to suspect that the joke might be on them. Iris tilted her head slightly, tracking the nearest target by sound. The clay pigeon's passage through air created a distinctive whisper at maximum arc extension. She waited, heartbeat steady, breathing controlled. Every muscle relaxed except the ones absolutely necessary for trigger press. 3 seconds, 5 seconds. The crowd grew restless. Then she fired. Crack! A half-second pause. Jasper's voice shaky. Target destroyed. Dead center. The crowd's restlessness transformed into shocked attention. Dylan opened his mouth to speak, closed it, opened it again like a fish on a dock. Carter's confident smirk had evaporated, replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like fear. She's counting seconds, Dylan whispered to Carter. She's tracking the motor timing. SEALs train 6 months for that level of auditory processing. Shut up, Carter hissed, but his face had gone pale. Iris didn't hear them, or if she did, she gave no indication. She'd entered that mental space where the world narrowed to breath, heartbeat, and target. The second clay pigeon's approach registered as a change in air pressure and a slight mechanical squeak from a worn bearing in motor 3. Wind gusted. The target's trajectory wobbled. Iris compensated instantly some part of her brain, doing calculus that most people needed computers for, and fired. Crack. Target destroyed. Jasper announced, his voice climbing half an octave. Chloe grabbed Delilah's arm hard enough to bruise. I've seen this before. In an instructional video. Advanced sniper training demonstration. The instructor was... She stopped, eyes going wide. No, that can't be. Can't be what? Delilah demanded. Later, just watch. Third shot, crack, fourth shot, crack. The rhythm was mechanical and human in its consistency. Iris's breathing cycle never varied. Her stance never shifted. She'd become less a person and more a weapons platform with biological components. The fifth target took longest. The motor had changed speeds, a randomization protocol meant to prevent exactly this kind of predictive shooting. Iris waited head cocked, listening to the altered rhythm until the pattern reasserted itself. Then she exhaled slowly and fired. Crack! Target destroyed, Jasper said numbly. 5 out of 5. Iris removed the blindfold herself, blinking in sudden sunlight. Her expression remained neutral, unchanged, as if she'd just completed routine paperwork rather than demonstrated skills that most special operations personnel trained years to develop. Carter's turn. Dylan's turn. A third SEAL volunteer. Each man confident, capable, trained to standards that made them elite among military personnel. Each man managing 1 or 2 targets at best, their shots wild, their timing, off, their confidence crumbling with each miss. Carter hit 1 out of 5. His face was scarlet when he pulled off his blindfold. Dylan managed 2, and only because he got lucky with 1 target that happened to pause at maximum extension just as he fired. The third SEAL, Petty Officer Marcus Webb, generally considered the best marksman on base, hit 2 targets and came closer on a third. But even his performance looked amateurish compared to what they had just witnessed from a civilian contractor in her first week on the range. Master Chief Ronald Coleman emerged from the admin building, Captain Thornton beside him, both men carrying tablets and wearing expressions of professional concern. Edward Wright trailed behind, his earlier suspicion, now hardened into certainty that something wasn't adding up. The crowd was murmuring now, speculation building like pressure behind a dam. Someone said competitive shooter. Someone else said private military contractor. A third voice suggested CIA training program. All the theories tried to fit impossible skill into acceptable boxes. Nobody said Marine Corps scout sniper, because that would have been absurd. Those operators were all men, weren't they? And besides, they didn't retire to civilian contractor positions cleaning equipment rooms. They got high-paying consultation gigs or executive protection details. Didn't they? Speaking of precision equipment, let's talk about what separates average shooters from elite marksmen. Modern rangefinders with ballistic calculators can compute wind drift elevation adjustments and target distance in under 2 seconds, technology that's revolutionized long-range accuracy. These advanced laser systems, paired with thermal imaging scopes, allow operators to engage targets in complete darkness with the same precision as daylight shooting. While Iris relied on iron sights and raw skill, today's military contractors have access to sophisticated optical systems that integrate with smart weapon platforms, providing real-time data overlays directly in the shooter's field of view. The marriage of technology and training creates capabilities that would have seemed like science fiction 20 years ago, turning 300-yard shots into routine engagements and pushing effective range to distances that redefine tactical planning. Carter stood in the center of the range, his $100 bet feeling increasingly hollow, pride and humiliation warred across his face, each emotion taking turns at dominance. Finally, pride won. It usually did with men like him. "This is nonsense," he said loudly, voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "She cheated. Someone fed her the timing pattern. Someone—" He grasped for explanation, found none that didn't make him look worse, and settled on aggression. "I'm not paying." He grabbed Iris's arm roughly, fingers digging into her bicep. "You think you're clever? Think you're better than us." Iris's voice remained quiet, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "Remove your hand, Lieutenant." The words were polite. The tone was not. There was permafrost in that voice, the kind of cold that burned. Carter's grip tightened. "Or what? You'll file a harassment complaint. Get me written up, I'm calling your bluff, sweetheart." Fletcher moved to intervene, but Bianca held up a hand, stopping him. Her expression had shifted from competitive jealousy to something more complex, recognition that she'd misjudged the situation and that watching this play out might reveal something important. "No," Bianca said quietly. "I want answers too. Who are you really, Bennett?" Dylan, meanwhile, had taken opportunity for action. While everyone focused on the confrontation, he'd rifled through Iris's equipment bag, searching for something to explain, justify, or rationalize what they had witnessed. His hand closed on metal, pulled out a challenge coin, heavy brass with distinctive markings. "What's this?" Dylan held it up, squinting at the engraving. "Tango 7 Ghost Skull." He laughed, but it sounded forced. "Where'd you steal this from eBay?" On the observation deck, Ronan Clark's coffee cup slipped from his fingers. It fell in slow motion, ceramic shattering on concrete, in a sound that somehow cut through all the other noise. His face had gone white, then red, then white again. Because he recognized that coin. He'd carried one just like it for 15 years. They weren't sold on eBay. They weren't given out lightly. Only 73 people in the entire United States military had ever earned the right to carry Tango 7 insignia, and Ronan personally knew 60 of them. He'd trained with one of them, a ghost who'd saved his life in Kandahar, a legend who'd retired 3 years ago and disappeared, a legend who, if database photos were accurate, looked a lot like the woman currently being manhandled by a lieutenant who had no idea how badly he was about to regret his life choices. "Stop!" Ronan's voice was parade ground volume, honed by 3 decades of command authority. "Everyone stop right now." The range froze. Every head turned toward the observation deck, where Senior Chief Ronan Clark descended the stairs, with the purposeful stride of someone on a mission. His face was carved from granite, his eyes locked on Iris with intensity that made several bystanders step back involuntarily. "Stand down, Lieutenant." It wasn't a suggestion. Carter's hand fell away from Iris's arm. Something in Ronan's voice, something beyond rank, beyond protocol, promised consequences that transcended normal military discipline. "Still here. Good. Because we're about to reach the part where she demonstrates a skill that makes even the instructors stop and stare. If you're loving this story of an underdog proving everyone wrong, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me which moment shocked you most so far. The best is still coming. Ronan pushed through the crowd, his gaze never leaving Iris. He was seeing things now, details his subconscious had flagged, but his conscious mind had dismissed. The way she stood at modified parade rest, even when relaxed. The distinctive pattern of scars on her knuckles, visible when she'd gripped the rifle. The calluses, the muscle memory, the breathing pattern. The pieces weren't just falling into place. They were crashing together with the force of revelation. "Let me see your identification," Ronan said quietly, but his tone brooked no argument. Iris reached slowly for her wallet, maintaining eye contact. Her movements deliberate and non-threatening, in the way of someone who'd been in tense situations before. She produced her contractor ID standard laminated card with her photo and clearance level. Ronan barely glanced at it. Instead, his attention fixed on something that had fallen from her wallet when she'd pulled the ID. A photograph. Worn. Creased. Carried so long the edges had softened. He picked it up carefully, holding it like something sacred. The photo showed 2 people in Marine Corps dressed blues. A man and a woman, both wearing expert marksmanship badges, both sporting the distinctive rope insignia of Scout Sniper School graduates. The man's arm was around the woman's shoulders. Both were smiling. Ronan's hand trembled slightly. "Cole Whitman." He said, his voice rough. Your husband. It wasn't a question. Iris's carefully maintained neutral expression finally cracked just for a moment. Pain flickered across her face, old pain, worn smooth by years, but never really gone. Was, she said quietly, past tense. The conversation was happening in low tones, but in the sudden silence of the range voices carried. Those close enough to hear felt the ground shifting beneath their feet, reality rearranging itself into something none of them had anticipated. Ma'am, Ronan said, and the word carried weight, respect, and dawning horror at how close they had all come to catastrophic mistake. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer truthfully. That challenge coin Dylan's holding, how did you get it? Iris looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes held calculations, risk assessments, decision trees branching into infinite possibility. Finally, she seemed to reach a conclusion. I earned it, she said simply. When? 2009 through 2022. The math was simple. 13 years. The same 13 years that Tango 7 had been operational. The same 13 years that Ghost the legendary Sierra 1 had racked up confirmed eliminations that made seasoned snipers weep with envy. Ronan's face had gone through several color changes. Now, it settled on something approaching awe. Sierra 1, he breathed. You're Sierra 1. The name dropped into the crowd like a grenade with the pin pulled. Someone gasped. Someone else cursed softly. Chloe made a sound that might have been vindication, or shock, or both. Fletcher's tablet slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers. Because Sierra 1 wasn't just a call sign, it was a ghost story. The kind of legend that instructors use to motivate students and demoralize enemies. 247 confirmed eliminations across 3 combat zones, the highest accuracy rating in Marine Corps history. The instructor who'd written the manual that every sniper in the U.S. military now trained from. Sierra 1 was a myth, a legend. The kind of operator who only existed in classified briefings and whispered conversations in secure facilities. Sierra 1 was not supposed to be a civilian contractor cleaning equipment rooms. That's impossible, Dylan said weakly. Sierra 1 is... they're... retired, Iris finished for him. Since 2022, medical discharge after an IED incident in Kandahar province. Lost most function in my left eye. She paused. Got it back through experimental surgery at Walter Reed. Decided not to return to active duty. Carter had gone from red to white to an interesting shade of green. His earlier grab, his casual dismissiveness, his sexual harassment, all of it was replaying in his head with new context. He'd just physically accosted one of the most decorated snipers in American military history, the kind of person who had direct lines to generals, the kind of person whose service record could end his career with a single phone call. Ma'am, He swallowed hard. I didn't... If I'd known... If you'd known, you would have behaved differently, Iris said, her voice still quiet, but carrying an edge now. Which means your respect was conditional. Contingent on knowing who I was, rather than how I should be treated regardless. The observation landed like a sniper, round precise, devastating, impossible to deflect. Fletcher found his voice first snapping to attention with crisp precision. Gunnery Sergeant Bennett. The correct form of address finally. On behalf of this facility, I apologize for... But the rest of his words were drowned out by the sound of fabric tearing. Because Carter, in his agitation and escalating panic, had grabbed Iris's jacket again, some instinct making him physically hold on to something as his world collapsed. And Iris, tired of being grabbed, had pulled away sharply. The shoulder seam gave way. Fabric ripped. And suddenly, everyone within visual range could see what had been hidden beneath contractor-appropriate clothing. Ink. Black as midnight. Unmistakable in its precision. A tattoo that covered most of her upper shoulder blade and wrapped partially around her deltoid. Crosshairs rendered in perfect geometric accuracy. Inside the crosshairs, Sierra 1 in block letters. Surrounding the call sign, 247 hash marks arranged in neat rows, each one representing a confirmed elimination. Above it all, the Marine Corps Eagle Globe and anchor. Below, dates in smaller font 2009 to 2022. The tattoo wasn't decorative, it wasn't artistic. It was a service record written in permanent ink, a memorial to 13 years of precision violence in defense of a nation that had just watched its representative be dismissed, harassed, and grabbed by people who should have known better. The range fell silent, not the silence of surprise, the silence of witnesses realizing they'd just watched something that would define the rest of their careers, for better or worse. 3 seconds of complete stillness. The kind of pause that happens before explosions, before earthquakes, before fundamental reality shifts. Then Ronan moved. His body snapped to attention with the precision of 32 years in service. Right hand came up in perfect salute fingers, together, palm down, edge of hand, cutting across his forehead, at exactly the correct angle. His voice carried across the range with clarity that made everyone flinch. Sierra 1 Senior Chief, Petty Officer, Ronan Clark, reporting. The formal announcement hung in the air. Other veterans recognized the protocol, the specific phrase used when a junior operator acknowledged a legendary senior. It wasn't just respect. It was recognition of lineage of shared brotherhood of debts that could never be fully repaid. Because Ronan suddenly remembered where he'd seen that silhouette before. Kandahar Province, August 2012. His squad pinned down by enemy fire ammunition, running low radio shot to pieces. And then impossible shots from impossible distances. Targets dropping with mechanical precision. A ghost they'd never seen but whose presence had saved 12 lives. He'd never gotten to thank Sierra 1. The legend had vanished before debrief, already moving to the next crisis. The next impossible situation that required someone who could place rounds through keyholes at ranges that defied physics. Now he could. The salute hung in the air like a declaration of war, or perhaps a declaration of truth that had been obscured for too long. Around the range, reactions cascaded like dominoes, falling in slow motion, each person's face registering shock, horror, disbelief, or, in a few cases, vindication. Carter Reynolds stumbled backward 3 steps, his face cycling through colors that didn't belong on living skin. His mouth opened and closed repeatedly, producing no sound except a strangled wheeze. What? No. That's not... His hand dropped to his side, trembling visibly. The arrogant confidence that had defined him 30 minutes ago had evaporated, leaving behind something raw and terrified. He'd grabbed Sierra 1. He'd called her sweetheart. He'd propositioned her like she was some weekend gun enthusiast who needed his guidance. The full weight of his mistakes was crushing him in real time. Dylan Brooks stood frozen, the challenge coin still in his hand, his arm extended as if offering it back, but unable to complete the motion. Tango 7 is... That's Ghost Unit. His voice cracked mid-sentence. They don't... Civilians can't... The sentence dissolved into incoherent stammering. His face had gone pale, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the cool morning air. The coin suddenly felt radioactive in his palm, sacred metal that he'd touched with casual disrespect, mocked as a trophy from eBay when it represented sacrifice he couldn't begin to comprehend. Fletcher Garrison's carefully maintained composure shattered like dropped glass. His body went rigid, then snapped to attention so fast his spine cracked audibly. Marine Scout Sniper Instructor. The words came out hoarse, almost reverent. His salute was parade-perfect 30 years of discipline overriding the shock. But his eyes held something between awe and horror, because he recognized the methodology now. The breathing pattern, the trigger discipline, the patient precision. He'd been teaching Bennett method for 6 years, without knowing Bennett herself was standing 20 feet away, listening to him mansplain her own techniques. The humiliation was total, absolute, and richly deserved. Lieutenant Commander Bianca Winters looked like she'd been struck by lightning. Her crossed arms fell to her sides, her expression crumbling from competitive disdain into something approaching devastation. Oh God, oh no, She backed away slowly, each step weighted with the realization of what she'd done. She'd challenged a legend, demanded proof from someone who'd already proven everything that mattered on battlefields she'd never see. Tried to force another woman to admit inferiority when that woman had accomplished more in 13 years than Bianca would in a lifetime. The jealousy, the resentment, the need to be the only successful woman in the room, all of it revealed as petty poison in the face of genuine excellence. Tears formed at the corners of her eyes, and she didn't bother wiping them away. The crowd erupted into motion and sound. Phones materialized in dozens of hands, cameras recording, capturing this moment for posterity or social media, or both. Gasps rippled through the assembled personnel like wind through grass. Is that really Sierra 1? Ghost is real. 247 marks. Holy cow. That's the legend. The murmurs built into a low roar of voices processing the impossible. Corporal Chloe Bradford's face transformed from shock to something approaching joy. I knew it! Her voice carried across the range, triumphant and vindicated. I knew I recognized that technique. The patience, the breathing, the Seaman Delilah Torres grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise her own eyes wide with realization. You're looking at a living legend, Delilah whispered, her voice shaking. An actual ghost. Gunnery Sergeant Jasper Hayes removed his cover slowly, respectfully, and stood at attention. His voice was thick with emotion when he spoke. Ma'am, it's an honor. Your training manual saved my life in Fallujah, November 2010. Building to building fighting. I used your wind reading methodology for cross-street shots, made 4 eliminations that prevented my squad from being overrun. He paused, swallowing hard. I never thought I'd get to say thank you. The range itself seemed to transform. 40-plus military personnel who'd been scattered across various stations were now converging toward the scene movement, instinctive and irresistible. Training stopped, conversations died, radio chatter ceased. Everyone was turning, witnessing, realizing they were present for something that would be retold in barracks and briefing rooms for years. The casual atmosphere of a training range had been replaced by something charged with significance, the kind of atmosphere that precedes medal ceremonies or memorial services. Sacred space carved from mundane mourning. Then the explosion of sound hit, dozens of voices erupting simultaneously. Questions shouted, names called. The noise was overwhelming, chaotic, a wall of human reaction that threatened to drown everything in its path. Master Chief Ronald Coleman pushed through the crowd. Captain Alexander Thornton close behind both men, moving with purpose. Ronald's tablet was clutched in his hand screen, glowing with official records. His face was professionally neutral, but tension radiated from every line of his body. Captain, Ronald said, his voice cutting through the noise with practiced authority. Database confirms identity. He turned the tablet so Thornton could see. Gunnery Sergeant Iris Bennett, Marine Corps Scout Sniper. Service dates 2009 through 2022. 247 confirmed eliminations across Kandahar Province, Fallujah, and Mosul operational zones. Primary instructor for Scout Sniper Advanced Training from 2015 through 2021. Retired with full honors after IED incident resulted in traumatic injury. He scrolled down. Medal recommendations include Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars with Valor Purple Heart, and he stopped his professional composure, cracking slightly. The Distinguished Service Cross for actions in Kandahar that resulted in rescue of 12 trapped operators under sustained enemy fire. Thornton studied the screen, then looked up at Iris. His expression was complex respect, warring with anger at the situation, embarrassment at how his personnel had behaved, and something approaching reverence for what he was reading. The training protocols used Navy-wide for precision shooting. He trailed off, already knowing the answer. Co-authored, Iris said quietly, her voice cutting through the noise without rising in volume. With my husband, Staff Sergeant Cole Whitman. He handled the biomechanics and physiology sections. I handled fieldcraft and practical application. The past tense landed heavily. Thornton's face softened fractionally. I'm sorry for your loss, Gunnery Sergeant. Gunny is fine, sir. Iris's tone was even controlled, but something flickered in her eyes, old grief carefully managed, but never truly absent. He died doing what he believed in. There are worse ways to go. Ronald pulled up another file, a photograph that made several onlookers gasp audibly. The image showed Iris in marine dress blues, chest covered in ribbons arranged in perfect rows, expert rifle badge with wreath and 3 bars, combat action ribbon, presidential unit citation. The Silver Star was clearly visible, its distinctive blue ribbon standing out among the sea of colors. But what drew the eye was the sheer density of awards, 30-plus ribbons representing multiple combat tours, training excellence, and valor under fire. This wasn't someone who'd seen combat. This was someone who'd spent 13 years living in it. The photograph showed younger Iris, harder eyes, leaner face, hair in a severe bun that suggested functionality over style. But it was unmistakably the same person standing before them in torn contractor clothing with 247 hash marks visible on her shoulder. Your service record indicates you wrote the current curriculum for... Thornton scrolled through the file, his expression growing more impressed with each line. Precision shooting under adverse conditions, wind reading methodology, cold bore shot protocols, low light engagement parameters, and extended range ballistics. He looked up. Every Marine Corps sniper since 2016 has been trained using your methods. Every Navy SEAL precision marksman has studied your case studies. You're not just a legend gunnery sergeant. You're the foundation. Iris shifted uncomfortably clearly, unused to public acknowledgement. The methods worked because my husband understood human physiology better than anyone I've met. The credit should be shared, Thornton finished gently. But you're here, and he's not. So I'm thanking you, on behalf of Naval Special Warfare Command, and personally thank you for your service and your continued contribution to keeping our people alive. The formal words delivered with genuine respect seemed to affect Iris more than any of the previous chaos. Her carefully maintained neutral expression cracked further, revealing something vulnerable beneath the armor of professionalism. Career transitions for military veterans require serious financial planning, especially when moving from active duty to civilian contractor roles. Specialized insurance programs for former special operations personnel offer coverage that understands high-risk backgrounds, including disability policies that account for service-related injuries. Investment portfolios designed for retired service members focus on stable long-term growth, with tax-advantaged veteran benefits maximizing retirement savings. Financial advisors experienced in military compensation. Structures help navigate VA benefits, security clearances, and consulting opportunities that leverage specialized training, ensuring decorated operators don't leave money on the table when transitioning to private sector work. Because the skills that make someone an elite warfighter don't automatically translate to understanding compound interest tax, optimization, or retirement planning. Getting the right guidance means the difference between financial security and struggling to pay bills after sacrificing years in service to something greater than oneself. The immediate shock was beginning to crystallize into action. Carter Reynolds moved first, his body still trembling, but his training overriding his panic. He came to attention with movements that would have been crisp if they weren't shaking. His voice emerged rough, unsteady, but determined to say what needed saying. "Ma'am," he swallowed hard. "There's no excuse for my conduct, none. I request to be formally written up for disrespect to a senior non-commissioned officer, sexual harassment, unwanted physical contact, and conduct unbecoming an officer." Each word seemed to cost him something. "I will accept any disciplinary action deemed appropriate, including reduction in rank, forfeiture of pay, or separation from service. My behavior was inexcusable regardless of who you are, and learning your identity only makes it worse because it means I would have continued if I hadn't been caught." The self-awareness in that last sentence was unexpected. Painful honesty that acknowledged not just what he'd done, but what it revealed about his character. Iris studied him for a long moment, her gaze weighing and measuring. When she spoke, her voice was firm, but not cruel. "At ease, Lieutenant." Carter's posture relaxed fractionally, though tension still radiated from every muscle. "You didn't know who I was, but now you do. How you proceed from here, how you treat every person regardless of their rank, appearance, or background, that defines you. Not what you did in ignorance, but what you choose to do with knowledge." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I don't want your career. I want your improvement. Can you offer me that?" Carter's throat worked. "Yes, ma'am, I swear it." "Then, we're done here." Iris turned slightly, dismissing him, not with contempt, but with the finality of a lesson taught and a debt considered paid. It was mercy, but mercy that came with the weight of expectation for fundamental change. Dylan Brooks approached next, the challenge coin extended in both hands like a religious offering. His face was streaked with tears he wasn't bothering to hide. "Gunny, his voice cracked. "This belongs to you, and I owe you $50. and an apology, and probably my career for treating you like a joke when you're everything we're supposed to aspire to be." He stopped collecting himself. "I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm asking anyway." Iris took the coin carefully, her fingers closing around the familiar metal. She held it for a moment, thumb tracing the ghost's skull, embossed on one side, before looking up at Dylan. "You're young. Young people make mistakes. The question isn't whether you'll make them, you will. The question is whether you'll learn from them." She closed his hand around the coin, pressing it back into his palm. "Keep it, not as a trophy, as a reminder. When you're tempted to judge someone based on appearance or assumptions, remember this moment. Remember what you almost missed because you were too busy running your mouth to open your eyes." Dylan stared at the returned coin, fresh tears spilling. I can't. You can, and you will, because someone gave me a second chance once and it made all the difference." Iris's voice softened fractionally. "Pay it forward. That's all I ask." Bianca Winters hadn't moved from her position several feet away, rooted to concrete by shame and self-loathing. She finally forced herself forward each step, requiring visible effort. When she reached Iris, she removed her rank insignia with shaking hands and extended them toward Captain Thornton. "Captain, I'd like to request immediate transfer to another facility. I'm not fit to serve alongside operators of this caliber." Her voice was hollow, scraped raw. "My jealousy, my need to prove other women inferior to validate my own worth, it poisoned everything. I don't deserve to wear this uniform in her presence." Thornton looked like he might accept the resignation. His hand started to reach for the insignia. Then Iris spoke. "Commander?" Her voice carried quiet authority. "Everyone has moments of weakness. Everyone struggles with insecurity, competitiveness, the need for external validation." She paused. "The difference between being a good officer and a great one is recognizing those struggles and choosing to rise above them. You can do that here, or you can run. But running doesn't make you better. It just makes you somewhere else." Bianca's hand trembled. "I tried to humiliate you, publicly, because seeing another woman succeed made me feel small." "Yes," Iris agreed simply. "And now you know what that looks like from the outside. The question is whether you're brave enough to change. Are you?" The challenge hung between them. Bianca stared at Iris for a long moment, searching for contempt or mockery, and finding only genuine question. Finally, slowly, she pinned her rank insignia back on. "I'll try." "That's all any of us can do." Iris extended her hand. After a moment's hesitation, Bianca shook it. The grip was firm, adult, a gesture of equals rather than victim and transgressor. Fletcher Garrison had been standing at attention throughout these exchanges, his face an interesting mixture of respect and crushing embarrassment. When Iris's attention shifted to him, he spoke before she could. "Ma'am, I've been teaching your methods for 6 years, lecturing students on patience precision and proper breathing protocols while you stood 20 feet away cleaning equipment I should have been maintaining myself." His jaw clenched. "I dismissed you as adequate when you're the reason half my students survived their first combat engagements. The irony would be funny if it weren't so damning." "You didn't know," Iris said, but Fletcher shook his head sharply. "I should have known better than to dismiss anyone based on age, gender, or job title. That's not about knowing your identity. That's about basic respect I failed to demonstrate." He straightened further. "If you're willing, I'd like to request your input on the precision shooting program. Not as a consultant we pay and ignore as the primary authority. Your rate, your schedule, your terms will adapt." Iris considered this, her expression thoughtful. "The program needs work. I've been watching. You're teaching students to rely too heavily on technology. When their scope breaks or their rangefinder fails, they panic because they never learned fundamentals." Fletcher paused. "That's exactly what our after-action reports indicate. Equipment failure leads to mission compromise because operators can't adapt. Because you're training them to use tools instead of training them to be tools that can use equipment when available." Iris's voice held the patience of someone who'd had this conversation many times. "Technology enhances capability. It doesn't replace competence. Will you help us fix that?" Fletcher's question was genuine hopeful, stripped of ego or pride. "On Mondays and Wednesdays, 0600 to 1400 hours. My rate is consultation standard for senior NCO specialists." Iris paused. "And I want Corporal Bradford assigned as my assistant instructor. She has the mindset. She needs the methodology." Chloe, who'd been standing nearby, trying to process everything, made a strangled sound of shock and joy. Ma'am, Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm a difficult teacher. My husband used to say I had the patience of a saint for targets and the temper of a sergeant major for students. A ghost of a smile crossed Iris's face, the first real smile anyone had seen. He wasn't wrong. Movement at the edge of the crowd drew attention. A young man in SEAL trainee uniform was pushing through his face wet with tears, his breathing ragged like he'd been running or crying or both. Lieutenant Asher Whitman looked barely old enough to shave his youth, emphasized by the emotional rawness he wasn't trying to hide. He stopped 3 feet from Iris, came to attention, and saluted. Gunny Bennett, his voice shook. Permission to speak, ma'am. Granted. You trained my father, Staff Sergeant Cole Whitman. He died in Kandahar Province, August 2012. The words came out in a rush, like he'd been holding them for years. He used to write letters, long ones. Talked about his training, his instructor, the person who taught him everything that kept him alive. He called you Ghost, because you'd appear during exercises, fix what needed fixing, and vanish before anyone could thank you properly. Asher's voice cracked. He said you saved his life 6 times before the one time you couldn't. Iris's composure finally shattered completely. Her face went white, then red, then white again. Her hands clenched at her sides, knuckles going bloodless with pressure. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. Cole, yes, he was... She stopped, swallowed hard, tried again. He was one of the best students I ever had. Natural talent combined with work ethic. That's rare. Most people have one or the other, never both. She paused. I'm so sorry for your loss, Lieutenant. Your father was a good man. He said the same about you. Asher pulled something from his pocket, a photograph worn and creased from being carried constantly. It showed 2 Marines in combat gear, faces streaked with dust, arms around each other's shoulders, in the exhausted camaraderie of people who'd survived something terrible together. Cole Whitman and Iris Bennett, both younger, both smiling, despite visible exhaustion. He carried this until the end. Said it reminded him that excellence was possible if you worked hard enough and listened to the right people. Iris took the photograph with trembling hands. She stared at it for a long moment, her breathing carefully controlled, visibly fighting emotion. May I keep this? I lost most of my pictures in the IED incident. I'd like to have something to remember him by. He'd want you to have it. Asher wiped his eyes. Ma'am, I need you to know something. He didn't die because you failed. He died because he chose to stay behind and provide cover for his squad's extraction. That was his choice, his decision, his sacrifice. You gave him the skills to make that choice matter. Because of what you taught him, 6 other Marines went home to their families. His voice strengthened. You didn't fail him. You made him capable of being a hero. The silence that followed was absolute. Every person on the range felt the weight of that moment, the intersection of past and present grief and gratitude, loss and legacy. Iris stood motionless, photograph clutched in both hands, her entire body radiating pain she was barely containing. Finally, she looked up at Asher. Your father saved my life, too. Did he tell you that? Asher shook his head. Helmand Province, January 2011. Spotter position compromised by shifting enemy patrol. I was pinned down, wounded, no egress route. Cole volunteered for an impossible shot, 850 yards high, wind low light, to create the distraction I needed. Made it. Gave me the window? I survived because he was willing to risk everything for someone he barely knew. Her voice roughened. I owed him a debt I could never repay. And then he was gone, and I couldn't even thank him properly. You can thank him by training me, Asher said quietly. Make me as good as he was. Let me carry on what you taught him. Iris studied the young lieutenant for a long moment, seeing echoes of Cole in his face, his posture, his determination. Finally, she nodded. Report Monday morning, 05:30 before the regular class. I'll assess your current skill level and design a program. She paused. This won't be easy. I'm going to push you harder than anyone has before. Are you ready for that? Yes, ma'am, whatever it takes. Good. Iris carefully folded the photograph and tucked it into her pocket close to her heart. Your father would be proud. Make sure you keep it that way. Captain Thornton cleared his throat, drawing attention back to official matters. Gunnery Sergeant Bennett, I want to make something clear. What happened here today was unacceptable on multiple levels. You were harassed, demeaned, and assaulted by personnel who should have known better regardless of your credentials. His voice hardened. Effective immediately, I'm implementing a comprehensive policy review. All civilian contractors with prior military service will have their records fully examined and their experience acknowledged from day one. Respect is earned through service, not dependent on people knowing about it. Ronald added, "Sir, I'm also recommending mandatory bias training for all personnel. Today's incident was preventable. We have systems in place to prevent exactly this kind of treatment, and they failed. That's on us to fix." Thornton nodded sharply. "Approved. Additionally, I want a full review of our contractor onboarding process. If someone with Gunnery Sergeant Bennett's credentials can slip through the cracks into equipment maintenance, we're failing to utilize resources and failing to show proper respect." He looked directly at Iris. "I'd like to officially offer you a position as the lead instructor for our new Precision Shooting Excellence program. Whatever salary you name, whatever conditions you require, whatever schedule works for you, we need what you can teach." "I've already agreed to consult with Chief Garrison," Iris said carefully. "I'm not looking for full-time employment, but I'm willing to help restructure the curriculum and provide direct instruction 2 days per week." "Then that's what we'll do." Thornton extended his hand. "Welcome back, Gunny, even if it's only partial capacity." The handshake was firm, professional, and marked a turning point. The crowd began to disperse slowly, individuals returning to their stations, with expressions ranging from thoughtful to shaken. Conversations buzzed everywhere, people processing what they had witnessed, sharing observations already beginning the process of turning this morning into legend. Fletcher approached Iris privately, his voice low and earnest. "Ma'am, I need to ask, the slow shooting speed that started all this, was that deliberate?" Iris's expression flickered with something that might have been amusement. "I'm testing a modified training protocol, precision over speed. Students are being taught to shoot fast and compensate for misses. I'm proposing we teach them to shoot slowly and deliberately until the muscle memory is perfect, then gradually increase speed without sacrificing accuracy." She paused. "Speed means nothing if you miss. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast, fast is deadly. But most instructors skip the slow part and wonder why their students develop bad habits." "That's..." Fletcher stopped his mind, clearly racing through implications. "That's going to revolutionize how we approach basic training." "It already has. I've been running private trials with willing students for 6 months. Their long-term accuracy rates are 30% higher than control groups, and their performance under stress is significantly better because they've trained neural pathways for precision rather than speed." Iris pulled out a small notebook, flipped to a marked page. "The data is compelling. I was going to submit it formally next month after final assessments. Your program would be the perfect large-scale testbed if you're interested." Fletcher's face transformed with the enthusiasm of someone presented with a solution to a persistent problem. "Absolutely. When can we start?" "Monday 0600. Bring your best instructors and your most skeptical students. I'll demonstrate the methodology and provide implementation guidelines." She snapped the notebook closed. "But understand this requires patience. From instructors, from students, from command. Results take longer initially, but they last forever. Can you commit to that? For a 30% improvement in accuracy, we'll commit to whatever it takes." The conversation drifted into technical details, training schedules, equipment requirements, assessment metrics. Around them, the range slowly returned to normal operations, though the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. Personnel moved with new awareness, treating each other with fractionally more respect, more consideration. The event had rippled through the base's culture, like a stone through water, and the waves would take weeks to fully settle. We're approaching the reveal, and I promise you, it's worth every second of build-up. Before we get there, make sure you're subscribed because we drop stories like this every week. Hit that bell icon so YouTube actually notifies you. The next 5 minutes will change everything these SEALs thought they knew. Advanced marksmanship certification programs now offer civilian instructors pathways to obtain credentials recognized by military training commands. These specialized courses cover not just shooting mechanics, but instructor methodology, range safety protocols, and curriculum development for tactical firearms training. Legal consultation services help retired military personnel navigate the complex regulations around firearms, instruction licensing, liability insurance requirements, and establishing private training facilities. Online platforms provide continuing education for certified instructors, keeping them current on evolving military doctrine and teaching techniques, because credentials matter when your students might be tomorrow's war fighters. The difference between being someone who can shoot and someone who can teach others to shoot under life or death pressure requires specialized knowledge that most marksmen never develop. Getting proper certification and legal framework isn't just about legitimacy. It's about ensuring that the skills passed down are accurate, effective, and won't get students harmed when they need them most. The morning stretched into afternoon. Personnel rotated through training rotations, but the story spread faster than wildfire. By noon, everyone on base knew some version of what had happened, though details varied wildly depending on who was telling it. Some accounts had Iris shooting blindfolded at 500 yards. Others claimed she'd disarmed Carter with a single move. The truth was impressive enough, but legends always grew in the retelling. Iris retreated to the equipment room she'd been assigned, seeking space and quiet to process everything that had unfolded. She'd come to Coronado under an assumed capacity specifically to avoid this kind of attention, to test whether the principles she and Cole had developed still mattered in an era of high-tech solutions and quick-fix training methods. She'd wanted to observe, assess, and possibly influence from the shadows. Instead, she'd been dragged into the light, exposed, and forced to confront not just the current generation of operators, but her own complicated relationship with her past. The room was small, lined with shelves holding cleaning supplies, spare parts, and equipment awaiting maintenance. She sat on a metal stool, pulled out the photograph Asher had given her, and allowed herself a moment of private grief. Cole's face smiled up at her, frozen in a moment of triumph after they'd both passed an especially brutal training evolution. God, he'd been young. They'd both been young, invincible, certain they'd live forever because they were too skilled, too careful, too good to die. Then August 2012 had proven them wrong. The IED had been her wake-up call 3 years later, the universe's way of reminding her that skill only delayed the inevitable, never prevented it. She'd lost the eye, undergone experimental surgery to restore function, and decided that 13 years was enough. Cole had died at 32. She'd made it to 39. Pushing luck further seemed disrespectful to his memory. So, she'd retired, taken the contractor job, tried to find meaning in maintenance work and quiet observation, tried to convince herself that she could contribute without being in the spotlight, that legends were better left, as legends rather than reality made flesh. Today had destroyed that comfortable fiction. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, tucking the photograph away quickly. Chloe Bradford entered, her expression caught between awe and nervousness. "Ma'am, I wanted to thank you properly for everything. The mentorship offered the defense against those guys, She gestured helplessly. "Just everything. You don't need to thank me, Corporal. I'm just doing what I wish someone had done for me when I was your age." Iris gestured to a second stool. "Sit. Tell me why you want to be a sniper." Chloe sat, collecting her thoughts. "I want to protect people who can't protect themselves. I grew up in a small town in Montana. When I was 16, there was a school shooting. The police sniper made the shot that ended it before anyone else died. He saved 70 people with one bullet." Her voice was steady, determined. "I want to be that person, the one who makes the shot that matters." Iris studied her carefully, looking past the words to the motivation beneath. "That's the right answer. Not glory, not excitement, not proving something. Protection. That mindset will serve you well." She paused. "But you need to understand what you're signing up for. Every shot I took haunts me. Not because I regret them, I don't, but because each one was a human being who woke up that morning not knowing it was their last day. That weight never leaves. Can you carry it?" "I think so, ma'am." "Thinking isn't enough. You need to be certain, because once you take that first shot, you can't untake it. It becomes part of who you are forever." Iris's voice softened. "I'm not trying to discourage you. I'm trying to ensure you go in with eyes open." Chloe met her gaze steadily. "I understand, ma'am, and I'm certain. Whatever it costs, I'll pay it. Then we start Monday. Be prepared to work harder than you've ever worked. Be prepared to fail repeatedly. Be prepared to question everything you think you know." Iris smiled slightly. "And be prepared to become someone you didn't know you could be." "Yes, ma'am?" Chloe stood saluted and turned to leave. At the door she paused. "Ma'am, what you did today standing there quietly taking their mockery, never getting defensive that taught me more than any shooting demonstration could. You showed us what real strength looks like." After she left, Iris sat in silence for a long moment, processing the unexpected observation. She'd thought she was hiding, avoiding confrontation, taking the path of least resistance. Apparently, she'd been demonstrating something else entirely without realizing it. The complexity of perception and reality amused her, as did the irony that her attempt to disappear had resulted in the most visible moment of her entire career. The afternoon faded into evening. Iris completed her assigned maintenance tasks because she'd been hired to do a job, and regardless of what else happened, she believed in fulfilling obligations. She cleaned equipment, organized supplies, and filed reports with the same meticulous attention she'd applied to everything else. At 17:30 hours, as she was preparing to leave, her phone vibrated. She pulled it from her pocket, glanced at the screen, and froze. Restricted number. She stared at it for several seconds, already knowing what this was already feeling, the past reaching forward to reclaim her. 3 years of retirement, 3 years of quiet civilian existence, 3 years of believing she was done with that life. The phone kept vibrating, insistent, demanding. Finally, she answered. "Yes. Sierra 1, this is Command." The voice was male professional familiar in the way of institutional authority. She didn't recognize the specific speaker, but she recognized the tone. "We have a situation. I'm retired." The words came automatically, a mantra she'd repeated dozens of times to various recruiters over the past 3 years. "We know. We also know you still qualify privately every 6 months. We know you've maintained your clearances. We know you're at Coronado testing training methodologies." The voice paused. "And we know what happened this morning. Quite the performance." Iris closed her eyes, unsurprised that Command already knew. Intelligence moved faster than gossip, and something this significant would have been flagged immediately. "If you're calling to recruit me back to active duty, the answer is still no. We're calling because we have 3 high-value hostages in mountain terrain. The operator we sent can't make the required shots. The angles are impossible, the distances are extreme, and the target window is closing fast." Another pause. "We need Ghost. You have other qualified snipers. Use them." "We have many qualified snipers. None of them are you. The shots require 2,000-yard accuracy in variable wind conditions, with potential collateral concerns. Your record shows 17 similar engagements with 0 civilian casualties. The next closest operator has 4 such engagements with a 75% success rate." The voice hardened slightly. "These hostages are Allied intelligence assets. If they're executed, it compromises operations across 3 countries and endangers hundreds of friendly personnel. We're not asking lightly." Iris's jaw clenched. They knew exactly which buttons to push. Hostages, Allied assets, downstream consequences affecting people who'd done nothing wrong except serve in dangerous places. The calculus of sacrifice she'd lived with for 13 years. "Send me the details." "Does that mean you're accepting?" "It means send me the details. I'll review them and make a decision." She paused. "And Command? If I do this, it's the last time. After this operation, Ghost stays retired, permanently. No more calls, no more requests, no more attempts to pull me back. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear, Sierra 1. Details incoming to your secure email within the hour. 48-hour window for prep and execution. Primary extract coordinates to follow upon mission acceptance." The line went dead. Iris stared at her phone for a long moment, watching the screen fade to black. Across the room, a mirror reflected her face, back older, now harder, marked by experiences that had carved themselves into her features. The scar above her left eye was visible in the fluorescent light, a permanent reminder of August 2015 and the IED that should have killed her. She thought about Cole, about the photograph in her pocket, about the life they'd planned that had been stolen by violence and duty, and the endless hunger of war for capable people. She thought about Asher's face, about Chloe's determination, about all the young operators who'd benefit from her presence as an instructor rather than an active shooter. She thought about 3 hostages who didn't know Ghost existed, who were counting on someone, anyone, to save them from whatever nightmare they were living. The choice was simple. The choice was impossible. The choice was inevitable. She opened her email and waited for the mission details to arrive. Can't get enough of operators getting humbled by unexpected heroes. Check the video in the corner. Another true story where a nobody turned out to be an absolute legend. But don't click yet, because this story has one final twist involving a classified phone call that'll leave you wanting more. 2 hours later, Iris sat in her small contractor apartment reviewing the mission package. The details were worse than she'd anticipated. 3 Allied intelligence officers captured during a botched extraction in unspecified mountain terrain, the deliberate vagueness suggesting operational security concerns. Enemy force estimated at 40 combatants. Hostages held in a fortified position, with overlapping fields of fire. The on-site operator had attempted engagement 3 times, and missed due to extreme distance and wind conditions. Time window 72 hours before scheduled execution. Required shots between 1,800 and 2,200 yards. Wind speeds variable from 15 to 35 miles per hour. Temperature differential causing significant mirage effects. Multiple potential engagement positions, none optimal. Collateral risk high due to civilian population in the general area. It was objectively speaking a nightmare scenario, the kind of mission that resulted in either legendary success or catastrophic failure, with no middle ground. It was also exactly the kind of challenge she'd spent 13 years training for. She pulled out a notebook, began running calculations. Wind deflection at 2,000 yards in 30-mile-per-hour crosswinds. Bullet drop for match-grade ammunition at extreme range. Mirage reading techniques, alternative firing positions, backup plans, contingency protocols. Her hands moved across the page with practiced efficiency, muscle memory translating tactical problems into mathematical solutions. This was comfortable. This was familiar. This was what she'd been built for, trained for, lived for. This was what she'd tried to leave behind. Her phone buzzed again. Text message from an unknown number. Whatever you decide, you'll make the right choice. Trust your instincts. They've never failed you yet. Reaper, Commander, retired Aaron Walsh. Her old mentor, the man who'd recruited her into Scout Sniper School, who'd pushed her harder than anyone who'd believed in her potential when she was nobody special. He was supposed to be fishing in Montana, enjoying retirement, definitely not involved in active operations. Apparently, Command had called in multiple ghosts for this one. She stared at the mission package at her calculations at the photograph of Cole that sat on her desk. He'd always said that capability created responsibility, that being able to do something others couldn't meant you had an obligation to act when lives hung in the balance. Easy philosophy when you were young and invincible, harder when you'd already given 13 years and watched good people die despite your best efforts. But the alternative 3 people executed because she'd chosen comfort over duty was unacceptable. She opened her laptop, composed a brief email. Mission accepted. Require 48 hours prep time. Will need following equipment. The list was extensive, specific, and non-negotiable. If she was coming out of retirement one final time, she'd do it properly. The response came within minutes. All equipment approved. Transport arranged for 0400 hours Monday. Welcome back, Ghost. Give them hell. Iris closed the laptop, stood and walked to her window. Outside, Coronado sprawled in evening darkness, lights twinkling across the base. Somewhere out there, young operators were training, learning, preparing for missions they couldn't yet imagine. Some of them would die. That was the nature of the profession. But if she could give them the skills to improve their odds to come home to families and futures, wasn't that worth the cost? And if she could save 3 people who'd been abandoned to their fate because the mission was too difficult, wasn't that what Cole would have wanted, what he'd died believing in? She thought about the morning's events, the mockery, the assumptions, the casual disrespect that had preceded revelation, the shock, the apologies, the sudden awareness that legends walked among them unrecognized. Maybe that was the real lesson. That excellence didn't announce itself, didn't demand recognition, didn't need validation from people who couldn't see past surface appearances. Excellence simply existed quiet and patient until circumstances demanded its revelation. And then it delivered. She turned from the window, pulled out her gear bag, and began packing. 48 hours to prep meant no time for sentiment or second thoughts. She had equipment to inspect, calculations to verify, contingency plans to develop. The mission would demand everything she had, and possibly more. but that was fine. She'd given everything before. She could do it again, one last time, for 3 people she'd never meet. For the operator on site who'd tried his best and come up short. For Cole's memory and the principles they had built together. For the quiet satisfaction of knowing that when the world needed Ghost, she zipped the bag closed, set her alarm for 0300 hours, and allowed herself one moment of reflection. Tomorrow she'd go back to being Gunnery Sergeant Iris Bennett, instructor and consultant. But for the next 72 hours, she'd be Sierra 1, again. Ghost. The legend who appeared when situations were impossible and departed when they were resolved. It felt like coming home and saying goodbye simultaneously. Both were appropriate. Her phone buzzed one final time. Message from Chloe. "Thank you for today, ma'am. You changed my life. See you Monday for training." Iris smiled slightly. Maybe she'd changed more than one life today. Maybe the morning's chaos had been necessary, had served purposes she couldn't yet fully understand. Maybe legends existed not to stay hidden, but to emerge at precise moments when their presence could catalyze transformation in others. She typed a brief response, "See you Monday, be ready to work. GB." Then she set the phone aside, laid down and closed her eyes. Sleep came quickly, the sleep of someone who'd made peace with difficult decisions and accepted the consequences of capability. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tonight, she rested. The legend continued. Across the base and barracks and offices and training facilities, conversations continued about the events of the morning, about the civilian contractor who'd turned out to be a ghost, about the assumptions shattered and lessons learned, about how excellence hid in plain sight until circumstances forced revelation. And in a classified operations center thousands of miles away, a team prepared to support Ghost's final mission, aware that they were witnessing the end of an era. After this, Sierra 1 would truly retire. The legend would fade into history remembered in stories and training manuals, but no longer walking among them. It was the end of something extraordinary. It was the beginning of something else. And in the space between ending and beginning, Ghost would do what Ghost always did. Deliver the impossible. One last time. The alarm shrieked at 0300 hours, dragging Iris from dreamless sleep into cold reality. She silenced it with practiced efficiency, already mentally cycling through the day's requirements. Coffee, weapons check, equipment verification, final calculations, then the long flight to wherever command was sending her, followed by mission brief with the on-site team who'd already failed 3 times. She moved through her apartment with economical precision, each action serving multiple purposes. While coffee brewed, she checked weather patterns for the target region, deliberately vague in the mission. Brief but satellite data didn't lie. High-altitude terrain, significant wind variance, temperature extremes. Afghanistan or Pakistan border region most likely. Possibly Yemen. The specific location mattered less than the environmental challenges. Her phone buzzed, text from Fletcher. "Heard through channels you're traveling. Don't know where or why, but come back safe. We need you here. Students need you. FG." Word traveled fast in military circles. She typed a brief response. "Will return Wednesday evening. Resume normal schedule Thursday morning. Keep training protocols consistent." Another buzz, this time from Ronan. "Ghosts flying again? Figured as much when I saw your face reading that mission brief you thought nobody noticed. Whatever they're asking, you'll handle it. Always do. Semper Fi." She smiled despite herself. 30-plus years in naval special warfare gave men like Ronan instincts that bordered on supernatural. He'd probably known she was Sierra 1. Within 5 minutes of seeing her on the range, had simply waited for circumstances to force revelation rather than doing it himself. "Semper Fidelis," she typed back. Always faithful. To the core, to the mission, to the people. Depending on skills she'd spent 13 years honing into something approaching perfection. The coffee finished brewing. She poured a cup, drank it black and scalding, using the physical discomfort to sharpen focus. In 6 hours, she'd be airborne. In 12, she'd be on site. In 24, she'd either have saved 3 lives or added 3 more ghosts to the collection that already haunted her quieter moments. The weight of it settled across her shoulders like a familiar coat, heavy, uncomfortable, but perfectly fitted after years of wear. She pulled out her gear systematically. Custom-modified rifle case containing a Macmillan TAC-50, the .50 caliber platform she'd used for her longest successful shots, ballistic computer with atmospheric sensors, rangefinder with integrated wind meter, spotting scope, ammunition match grade hand-loaded to specifications she'd developed over thousands of test rounds, ghillie suit components, communications equipment, medical kit, survival gear. Each item was checked twice, function tested, then packed in precise order. Muscle memory from hundreds of previous deployments guided her hands while her mind worked through scenarios. Primary firing position compromised. What's secondary? Wind shifts mid-shot? How fast can she compensate? Target moves during trigger press. Does she abort or adjust? The mental rehearsal was as important as the physical preparation, pre-solving problems that might not occur, but probably would. At 04:15, headlights swept across her window. Government sedan, nondescript, driven by someone who'd been doing this long enough to know better than to ask questions. She grabbed her bags, locked the apartment, and descended into pre-dawn darkness. The driver was young Marine Corps by posture, probably fresh from motor T school, and honored to be supporting whatever this was. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, loading her gear with careful efficiency. "ETA to airfield is 20 minutes. Aircraft is prepped and waiting." "Thank you, Corporal." She slid into the back seat, already reviewing mental calculations. 2,000 yards, 30-mile-per-hour crosswind. High-altitude thin air meant less bullet drag, but also less stability. Temperature inversions would create mirage effects. She'd need to account for. Her phone buzzed again, this time an unknown number. She almost ignored it, then recognized the area code, Montana, which meant either a wrong number or, "Hello, Gunny Bennett." The voice was female, young, uncertain. "This is Seaman Torres, Delilah. I'm sorry to call so early, but Corporal Bradford asked me to reach you. She wanted to give you something before you left, but didn't know your departure time." Iris checked her watch. 04:20. "I'm currently in transit to the airfield. I won't have time for—" "I'm at the airfield, ma'am. Chloe drove us here. We've been waiting since 0300 just in case." A pause. "She said it was important. That you'd understand." The car turned onto the airfield access road. In the distance, a C-130 sat on the tarmac, engines already warming cargo ramp down, and beside the perimeter fence barely visible in the dim light, two figures waited. "Tell Corporal Bradford I'll be there in 3 minutes." The sedan pulled up to the gate. Security waved them through after brief credential check. As they approached the aircraft, Iris could see Chloe and Delilah more clearly now, both in civilian clothes, both looking exhausted and determined. The car stopped. Iris stepped out her bags, already being loaded onto the aircraft by ground crew who moved with the practiced efficiency of people who had done this too many times to count. Chloe saluted, then seemed to realize the absurdity of formal protocol at 04:30 in the morning and lowered her hand. "Ma'am, I know you're busy. I know you have somewhere important to be. But I wanted—" She pulled something from her pocket, extended it with both hands. "My father gave this to me before his last deployment. He said it brought him luck. He didn't make it back, but I think maybe the luck ran out because I wasn't there to keep believing in it." Her voice steadied. "I want you to have it. Bring it back when you return. That way, you'll have to come back." It was a St. Christopher medal patron, saint of travelers, protector of those who journeyed into danger. The medal was worn smooth from handling warm from being carried against Chloe's skin. Religious symbolism aside, the gesture's meaning was clear. A talisman, a connection, a promise. Iris took it carefully, feeling the weight of more than metal. "I'll bring it back," she said quietly. "Wednesday evening. You have my word." "That's all I need, ma'am." Chloe's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Come back safe. We still have training to complete." Delilah stepped forward, offering a small notebook. "This isn't as sentimental," she admitted. "But Ronan asked me to compile notes on common mistakes new snipers make. He said you'd want data, not emotions. So here's 6 months of range observations compiled and cross-referenced." Iris accepted the notebook, flipped through pages of meticulous handwriting, documenting every error pattern, every recurring mistake, every training deficiency Delilah had witnessed. "This is excellent work, Seaman. Intelligence collection skills like this don't develop overnight." "I want to go into analysis eventually," Delilah said shyly. "Figure if I'm going to do it, might as well learn from the best. When I return, we'll discuss how observation skills translate to tactical intelligence." There's overlap most people miss. Iris tucked the notebook into her jacket pocket opposite the St. Christopher medal. Data and faith analysis and hope carried together into whatever came next. The C-130's engines increased pitch. The loadmaster appeared at the ramp, gesturing urgently. Time was compressing as it always did before missions. "I need to board," Iris said. "Thank you both. For the gifts for the faith, for waiting in the cold darkness because you thought it mattered. It does." She turned toward the aircraft, then paused. Some instinct made her look back at these two young women who represented everything she was trying to preserve: potential determination, the belief that excellence was achievable through dedication and proper guidance. "Corporal Bradford, you asked me yesterday why I do this, why I came back even partially after retiring." Iris's voice carried over engine noise. "It's not for glory or recognition. It's because every person I train, every operator who comes home, because they learned proper wind reading or breath control or patience, that's Cole's legacy, continuing. That's his sacrifice, meaning something beyond the moment he died." She paused. "And every time someone like you looks at me and sees possibility instead of limitation, that's my legacy. That's what makes the cost worthwhile." Chloe nodded, unable to speak, past the emotion clogging her throat. Iris turned and walked to the aircraft, her stride purposeful, her bearing that of someone who'd made peace with difficult decisions. The ramp began rising as soon as she crossed the threshold. Through the narrowing gap, she could see Chloe and Delilah standing at attention, saluting a legend disappearing into darkness and uncertainty. The C-130 lifted off 18 minutes later, climbing into pre-dawn sky with its cargo of one operator specialized equipment and the weight of expectations that came with being Ghost. Iris sat in the jump seat alone in the cargo bay, except for her gear, and a loadmaster who'd learned years ago not to bother passengers who clearly wanted silence. She pulled out the notebook Delilah had given her, used the dim red light to review observations. The girl had good instincts. She'd identified pattern failures that most people would have missed, documented environmental factors affecting performance, even noted social dynamics that contributed to training deficiencies. Given proper guidance, she'd make an excellent intelligence analyst, possibly even an instructor herself, though she didn't seem to realize that potential yet. The St. Christopher medal pressed against her chest through jacket fabric. She'd never been particularly religious, hard to maintain faith after watching good people die for unclear reasons, but she understood the power of symbols. The medal wasn't magic. It wouldn't stop bullets or correct wind drift, but it represented connection obligation, the promise she'd made to return. Sometimes promises were stronger than armor. Her phone vibrated one final time before they climbed above cellular range. Message from an unknown number. "Third time I'm breaking retirement silence for you, Sierra 1. That's a record. Don't make me regret it. Target intel attached. Reviewed during flight. Weather window closes in 48 hours. After that, hostages are dead regardless of what you do. No pressure. Reaper." The attached file was encrypted, required 3 separate authentication codes to open. When it finally decrypted, Iris found herself looking at satellite imagery, intercepted communications, and tactical assessments that painted a picture significantly worse than the initial mission brief had suggested. The hostages weren't just intelligence assets. They were undercover operators who'd been burned by someone with access to classified databases. The capture wasn't opportunistic, it was targeted, deliberate, designed to send a message. And the 40 combatant estimate was conservative. Actual enemy strength was closer to 70, with reinforcements available within hours if the situation escalated. The on-site operator who'd attempted the shots wasn't incompetent. He was working with inadequate intelligence, compromised positioning, and equipment that wasn't rated for the extreme distances involved. He'd done everything right and still failed because the mission parameters were impossible for anyone except someone with very specific skills developed over very specific circumstances. Someone like Ghost. Iris read through the file twice, absorbing details, identifying discrepancies, noting questions that needed answers. Then she pulled out her own notebook, began recalculating based on updated intelligence. The numbers were worse now, wind patterns more complex, collateral risks higher, escape routes more limited. But the fundamental challenge remained unchanged. 3 people would die unless someone could make shots that defied conventional wisdom about effective range and environmental limitations. She'd made 17 similar shots during her active career. 17 times she'd been asked to do the impossible and had delivered. Her success rate was 100%, but that was misleading. Survivorship bias meant she was only counting the missions she'd survived. The unsuccessful missions, the ones where operators died, because even Ghost couldn't beat physics, those weren't in her official record. She carried them anyway. In memory and dreams, in the careful way she approached every subsequent mission, knowing that perfection was impossible, but anything less meant failure. The C-130 droned through darkness. Hours passed. Iris worked through calculations, memorized terrain features, developed contingency plans for scenarios that might never occur but probably would. When the loadmaster brought her water and a meal, she barely registered his presence, her mind already on target 2,000 miles away. They landed at an undisclosed forward operating base as dawn broke across mountains that could have been Afghanistan or Pakistan or Yemen or any of a dozen other places where America conducted operations it didn't acknowledge. The base was small, temporary, populated by people who didn't wear name tags or unit patches. Everyone moved with the economical efficiency of professionals who had seen too much to waste motion on unnecessary activities. A colonel met her at the aircraft. No name, given no rank insignia, visible just authority radiating from every gesture. Sierra 1, heard you were the best. Hope the reputation is accurate because we're out of options. Show me the target, Iris said simply. They walked to a briefing room containing detailed maps, real-time satellite feeds, and the on-site operator who'd failed 3 times. He was young, capable, and carrying the weight of failure across his shoulders. When he saw Iris, his expression flickered between hope and resentment. Hope that someone could succeed where he'd failed. Resentment that his inadequacy had required calling in a legend. Master Sergeant Kyle Morrison. He introduced himself. I tried everything, every position, every calculation, He stopped collecting himself. I'm sorry I couldn't get it done. Show me your shooting data. Iris said, neither judgmental nor comforting. Facts mattered, feelings didn't. Wind readings, temperature logs, all 3 attempts. Morrison pulled up files. Iris studied them in silence, seeing immediately where environmental factors had exceeded his compensation ability. He'd done good work with the tools available, but good wasn't enough when the margin for error was measured in inches at ranges where most people couldn't see targets with naked eyes. You did what you could with what you had, she said finally. But this mission requires equipment and experience you don't possess. That's not failure. That's recognition of limitations. The real failure would have been continuing to try and wasting time while hostages died. Morrison's shoulders relaxed fractionally. Can you make the shot? I can make a shot. Whether it's the right shot depends on factors I won't know until I'm in position. Iris turned to the satellite feeds. I need current weather data, real-time updates on enemy movement patterns and communication protocols. When I'm ready, I'll take the shot. You'll spot for me and confirm results. Clear. Clear, ma'am? The briefing lasted 2 hours. Every detail examined, every contingency planned, every potential failure mode addressed. When they finally finished, Iris had a clear picture of what she was walking into and how narrow the success window truly was. They moved to the range to verify her rifle's 0. Even after transport, the Macmillan TAC-50 functioned flawlessly, punching rounds through targets at 1,000 yards with mechanical consistency. Morrison watched in silence, seeing firsthand the difference between competent and exceptional. How do you make it look easy? He asked finally. It's not easy, it's familiar. Iris made a minute adjustment to her scope. I've taken enough shots that the calculations are muscle memory. The physics become intuition. But it started with thousands of misses, just like everyone else. She fired again. Perfect center. The difference is, I kept shooting after most people would have quit. They choppered to the forward position as afternoon faded toward evening. The firing position was a mountainside overlooking a valley where enemy forces held the hostages in a reinforced compound. The distance measured 2,100 yards, far enough that targets were barely visible, even through high-powered optics. Iris set up with methodical precision, creating a stable shooting platform, arranging equipment within easy reach, calculating baseline data for wind and temperature. Morrison established communication with the command post and began feeding her real-time intelligence updates. Hostages are in the northeast building, he said quietly. Second floor western room, enemy force distributed across the compound. Primary target is the commander. Eliminating him should create enough confusion for extraction team to move. Where's the commander? Southeast tower. Moves every 20 to 40 minutes. Iris settled into position, eye to scope, studying the compound through layers of atmospheric distortion. She could see heat shimmer, wind drift indicators, movement patterns. The commander wasn't visible yet, probably inside away from potential threats. They waited. Patience was the sniper's primary weapon, more important than ammunition or equipment. Hours passed. The sun descended, painting mountains in shades of orange and purple. Temperature dropped, affecting ballistic calculations. Wind shifted from cross to quartering, then back. Morrison handed her water protein bars, updated weather data. She consumed them without taking her eye from the scope. Her entire existence narrowed to the view through glass. At 1947 hours, the commander emerged onto the tower platform. Iris's breathing steadied automatically, heart rate dropping into the controlled rhythm she'd trained for thousands of repetitions. Her finger found the trigger, applying just enough pressure to take up slack without firing. Range 2,112 yards, Morrison whispered. Wind 15 miles per hour, quartering from right. Temperature 47 degrees, barometric pressure 29.92. Iris fed the data into calculations that happened faster than conscious thought. Adjusted scope elevation, compensated for wind, accounted for Coriolis effect, because at this distance even Earth's rotation mattered. Found the perfect moment between heartbeats where her body was completely still. Exhaled slowly. Squeezed. The rifle thundered. Recoil familiar, absorbed, redirected. Through the scope, she watched the bullet's flight, not literally visible, but traced through decades of experience, knowing exactly where it should go. Impact. The commander dropped. "Hit confirmed," Morrison said, voice shaking slightly. Target eliminated. Extraction team moving. But Iris was already tracking secondary targets, because one shot was never enough. The operation required sustained precision until friendly forces secured the hostages and exfiltrated. She fired again and again. Each shot carefully placed, each target selected for maximum tactical impact. When the extraction team radioed mission success, 17 minutes had elapsed. Iris had fired 9 rounds. All 9 had found their marks. The hostages were alive. The enemy was scattered, and Ghost had delivered the impossible one final time. They exfiltrated under cover of darkness, choppers skimming low across hostile terrain. Iris maintained alertness until they reached the safety of friendly airspace, only then allowing herself to relax fractionally. Morrison sat across from her, his expression complex. "I watched you work," he said over engine noise. "I still don't understand how you made those shots." "Practice," Iris said simply, "and accepting that some things require more talent than hard work can develop. You're a good operator, Sergeant, but extreme range precision requires specific gifts. That's not your fault. Will you teach me? I can teach you to be better. I can't teach you to be me. Nobody can." She paused. But better is enough for most missions. This was the outlier, not the standard. The flight back to Coronado took 14 hours across multiple transports. Iris slept in segments combat naps that refreshed without truly resting. When she finally walked off the final aircraft Wednesday evening, exactly as promised, she found Chloe and Delilah waiting again. "You came back!" Chloe breathed relief and joy mixing on her face. "I gave my word." Iris pulled out the St. Christopher medal, pressed it into Chloe's hands. "Your father's luck held. Maybe it always did. Maybe he knew the real luck was having someone believe in his return enough to give this away." Chloe clutched the medal, tears streaming freely now. "Thank you. For coming back. For everything." Iris nodded, then turned toward the base exit, where a familiar sedan waited. Tomorrow, she'd resume training schedules, continue developing methodologies, invest in the next generation of operators. Tonight, she'd return to her apartment, file mission reports, and try to remember what normal life felt like. Her phone buzzed as she reached the vehicle. Message from command. "Mission success, 3 hostages recovered alive, enemy force disrupted, Allied operations secured across 3 countries. Thank you, Sierra 1, we won't forget. And we won't call again. As promised, Ghost stays retired, fair winds and following seas." She stared at the message, feeling something release in her chest. It was done. Truly finally done. No more missions, no more calls in the darkness, no more impossible shots in hostile mountains. She'd given 13 years plus one final operation. The debt was paid. Another message this time from Reaper. Heard it went well. Knew it would. One last thing though, that commander you eliminated, not random insurgent. He was the officer who sold the intelligence that got Cole killed. Thought you should know. Call it closure or call it justice. Either works. Walsh. Iris's breath caught. She read the message 3 times, processing implications that rewrote history. Cole hadn't died in random combat. He'd been betrayed, and for 12 years the man responsible had walked free untouched, protected by distance and ignorance, until 17 minutes ago, when Ghost had delivered justice 2,000 yards through mountain air and wind that should have made the shot impossible. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Settled for, neither just sat in the sedan's back seat, processing the knowledge that her final mission had been personal in ways Command hadn't mentioned. Whether that was an intentional giving her closure disguised as duty or coincidental didn't matter. The result was the same. Cole was avenged. The debt was balanced. The circle was complete. She typed a brief response, "Thank you for telling me, and thank you for 3 decades of guidance. Retirement suits you, Reaper. Stay fishing, stay happy, fair winds." The sedan pulled away from the airfield, carrying her back toward contractor apartments and training schedules, and the quiet satisfaction of teaching rather than executing. Behind her, the C-130 she'd arrived on was already being prepped for its next mission, carrying different operators toward different crises. Ghost's work was finished, but Sierra One's legacy would continue in every sniper who trained, using her methods, every operator who survived, because someone had taught them proper wind reading or breath control or the patience to wait for perfect shots. Some legends retired, others simply changed form, becoming something more permanent than any single person could achieve. As the sedan merged into evening traffic, Iris pulled out the photograph of Cole studied his young face frozen in triumph. "We got him," she whispered. "Finally, it's done." And for the first time in 12 years, she felt the knot of unfinished business finally release its grip on her heart. The legend rested, the instructor continued, and somewhere in mountains half a world away, 3 families were reuniting with loved ones they'd thought lost, never knowing that their salvation had come from a ghost who appeared one final time when the impossible became necessary. The end.